Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Kelly Coulter. She is a psychic medium, volunteer policewoman, and a former school teacher. Her work involves collaborating with law enforcement as a forensic intuitive. In this episode, we will discuss how she became a medium and what inspired her to get involved with psychic investigations. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
I noticed that we're starting to see more psychics, more mediums getting involved with investigations. Do you think this is a current trend, or has this been going on for years without us really being aware of it?
That's a good question. I think it's been years that people have been doing this, but it just hasn't been in the spotlight. Normally, when psychics work with law enforcement, it's not known. So I think...
Good point.
Yeah.
In your experience, the medium piece of the investigations can uncover things that a traditional investigation might not. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it's true. If you think of us kind of like an additional tool, it goes along with traditional ways you find people who committed crimes or missing or murdered people. So we're kind of just more of like an addition to what law enforcement does.
So when did you discover your mediumship skills?
Oh, that's a good question. Like so many of us, I was late to the party. It wasn't until later in life when I had something traumatic happen, which for me was a surgery that went wrong, that I started kind of remembering that I had these abilities that I had when I was younger. And I think the first time that I remember when I was young is I have visitation dreams. It's the first time I had one when my dad passed away. So I was 12 years old. I remember having this dream where he came and talked to me. It's like just like talking to the person like they're standing in the room. And then after I woke up, the phone rang and it was the hospital saying that he passed. So that's the first time I can remember as a young child.
Visitation dreams are really interesting. So what is the difference between mediumship and someone who wouldn't typically describe themselves as a medium or having those skills and a visitation dream? Do you think that people need a certain kind of heightened awareness to have the visitation dream, or is it a lot more common than we think?
That's a super good question. I actually feel like you kind of have to have knowledge of or be a dreamer. Like I'm already a dreamer. I dream all the time. But I always say the visitation dreams are the ones where you're going to remember them forever. So like, for instance, I'm 58. I was 12 when I had that dream, and I can remember it like yesterday. Now, I don't have a lot of visitation dreams that are kind of, for me, rare. But I always tell people that I feel like you have to be aware that you can do this, and maybe spirit has to be aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot more about visitation dreams as well. I always thought maybe everyone had them, but I'm not so sure about that. So how did you get involved in these psychic investigations?
Well, for one, I'm Scorpio, so we love deep, dark secrets. And, I'm a crime junkie, love crime TV. But it wasn't until I studied with Tony Stockwell, who has a lot of programs in psychic detection, and it really sparked my interest. So it led me to take classes with him and mentor with him. And it kind of just built upon that. And then that class formed a group, and we still work together every Wednesday as a group.
Tony Stockwell's a really interesting guy. He's been doing this for a while too. So the tools that you mentioned before and the techniques that are important to solve mysteries and things of that nature, psychometry, intuitive profiling, how does that work?
So psychometry, people might think of that more like when you pick up an object and you can kind of feel the energy. Maybe you go into an antique store, you pick up something and you just get like flashes of maybe who owned it. You might pick up smells, things like this. But you can also do it with a photo. So in psychic investigation, we use a photo, and it just depends on the case. So if it's my case, I will have a little bit more information. So I will go to my team, and all I do is show them the picture, and then they psychometrize it, and then we meet like a week later. If I'm doing it, I ask the person just to give me the photo and a name, and then that's all I want to know. and then I psychometrize it. So I look through the eyes, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and I see what I pick up. Sometimes I might see something, I might hear something, I might feel like I'm that person. So that's how we use psychometry in psychic investigation.
What type of cases do you typically work on?
Well, there's a process for weeding some of them out. Ones that we feel we can help with. So missing persons, that's one we do quite a bit. Current missing persons or solving murders, trying to figure out what happened. And then also cold cases. Actually, with a lot of the new DNA things that they do now, some of those cold cases are being solved. So where we wouldn't maybe get the validation with cold cases, we're finding that actually now with them solving them, that years later that we are.
Okay. Can you give us an example of a case where your skills provided some closure for the case?
Sure. One of the cases that I worked on, it was with the group that I was mentioning before. It was a missing teenage girl. And for me, the skill that I had for that case was my visitation dream. So I usually will set the intent before I go to bed to kind of give me something over the night. Let me, dream about the situation if you can show me. So in that case, I had a dream that this girl was in her boyfriend's closet in his bedroom. And when the mom was home, she stayed there. And when the mom went to work, she would come out. And, we worked on the case, and it came to be that she was indeed at his house. I don't really know if she was in the closet, but that's how I saw her. And so that girl did come home later.
Were you able to see whether she's being held against her will or not necessarily?
Yeah, she was not. It was something that was planned with her. If I remember correctly, she was pregnant. So she kind of ran away and was hiding.
Okay. Your skills did provide some value to the case, obviously, and it basically solved it, right?
That's just an example of how I work. Different people on the team have different skills. So it's kind of collaborative. And then if I were working on the case alone with myself, then it would be me, but can't take all the credit all the time.
How do you collaborate with law enforcement and the investigators on the cases? How do you do that?
That's a really good question. It's rather difficult. There's a couple of reasons. It's hard to be taken seriously, of course, and law enforcement should be skeptical. Some people on our team have connections with law enforcement, maybe family, and so they're able to work. But for the most part, we can send in tips, if they would take them. But for the most part, we work with the families. At the end, we'll write up a report that they can give to law enforcement that they're working with. I also work with a group called Find Me Group with Kelly Snyder, who's former law enforcement, and he is very open to working with psychics. So he will send us a case, and I think there might be at least probably 20 psychics on the team, but there's also, search and rescue. He has a big team, a big volunteer team.
So the families in this case, it seems to me that you're going to glean more information, what you need, and the investigators, you just kind of hand off a report.
Yeah, and it's quite an extensive report, and they can take it to law enforcement.
Okay. You're involved in something called the Austin Case Files event. What exactly is that? What do we need to know?
Oh, yeah, that's going to be so much fun. Myself and another psychic medium, Kay Reynolds, are putting on an in-person psychic investigation in Austin. We're working on real cases. It's a 3-day in-person and then 3 extended Zoom classes after. So, you're going to learn what it takes to work with law enforcement and families. You're going to learn what your psychic superpower is. You'll learn how to write a report like I was talking about. It's in April, so it's coming up April 10th through the 12th.
This episode should be out by then. That will definitely be good. So how does this activity compare to your other services that you provide, like doing readings? How is it different?
The psychic investigation? Yeah, well, it is quite different. You're not doing a reading, but I typically have someone come to me, so like a family member, and I will meet with them and then decide whether or not to take the case. With psychic investigation, I teach a lot of classes, like we were just talking about psychometry or remote viewing. And I have a couple of 12-week long mentorships that I teach each year.
Guidelines for people, sitters in this case, who want to go consult a medium, seek out a medium, they're trying to read family or friend that's passed over. What are some do's and don'ts, practical notes that these people need to know about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there needs to be kind of that exchange of energy. So for me, I don't like to know anything, right? I tell them, just a yes, but that exchange of hearing them say yes helps me, but I also don't like to know anything. And some people, you have to stop. Wait, don't tell me. And it's because then what am I going to say? I mean, there's a lot to say, but I don't want them to tell me everything, and then I would get in my head. So be skeptical. Don't give out too much information, but you have to be open to getting information. Yeah, those are some of my tips for being a good sitter.
I agree completely, because the consensus seems to be the less information they give you, the better. I've heard of certain instances where the medium would ask, who do you want to see, and ask questions about how old are they and this and that, whatever. That's not okay. So you just answered my question there.
Yeah, no. Oh, no. And for me, it's because, again, what validation am I going to bring you if you tell me everything about them? And some people, they haven't ever had a reading, so they don't know what to do. So I do actually let them know before we start, like how I work and what I expect them to do, just so they'll be more comfortable.
Definitely good advice, and appreciate those points. So your experience, right, as a medium, what has it taught you about the veil? Because one of the things we all keep hearing is that the veil is actually getting thinner. What has been your experience?
Well, I agree. I think more people are open. Psychic is always considered kind of a dirty word, but call it intuition, whatever you want. I think people are becoming more aware. And I think my theory as a former teacher is that it's the younger kids who are really going to open up. So even kids in their 20s, but going all the way back to kids that are being born now. I don't know if you've been watching the news about Jacob Barber, the whistleblower for the UAPs. They're talking about using psionics to communicate. And this is, with the government. So being open to doing different things with psychic abilities. Who knows?
Speaking of psychic abilities, Bob Ginsberg, who's one of the founders or the founder of the Forever Family Foundation, wrote a book called The Medium Explosion, which is meant for people that are seeking out mediums, because his findings are that about 85% of the mediums that are tested don't really have the skills. And what I took away from that is someone who has good intentions but doesn't really have the skills can do as much damage or more than someone who's an outright fraud. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But the other part of that book has to deal with the literal explosion, psychics, mediums. Are you saying the same thing?
Yeah. I think some of that has to do with, if you're old like me, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a community of people. You were just the girl that was weird. So I think that has something to do with it. I do agree that, some people do more harm than good, but for a lot of different reasons, right? I agree with that 100%.
And the reason they're able to do that is they do testing to certify mediums. You don't pay for it. You can't pay to be on any list. So let's say if you were to enter that program, they would give you 4 or 5 Skype readings, and you don't know who it is, you know nothing about them. Then they would grade the sitters, right? And they would say, well, what about this response? And they have to score a certain amount of points in order to be certified, and only about 15% get certified. That doesn't mean that they might exclude some people that are just not good under pressure, but it gives you an idea that even though many of these people do mean well, we've come across a couple on the show where their skills could be a little bit more deeper. I have to be careful what I say, obviously, but that is a concern for those listening out there that are thinking about going to see a medium. It's very important what you said earlier. The really good ones I found, they'll even say what you said. Do not give me any more information. Whoever's going to come through is going to come through. That's what I found. So also speaking of psychics, you created something called the Psychic Symposium. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so that was kind of a spur of the moment thing that I ended up loving, falling in love with. So I had this idea to showcase some of the people in our group that I was talking about. And Tony Stockwell was also a speaker. And Cindy Keza was supposed to, but she wasn't able to make it. But it was 3 days of different psychic mediums presenting different things involving psychic investigation. So we had remote viewing, energy reading, locating the missing through energy, lighting them up. We had forensic astrology. It was literally 3 packed days of information.
Good. Before we finish, we'll get a link to that, which I imagine is on your website, correct?
Yes.
So psychic investigations, where do you see the role of that in our culture?
I hope it's going to be accepted, but like you say, there are a lot of people who also don't have great psychic abilities. And same thing with mediumship, right? You have to keep practicing and you have to be willing to learn from different teachers, learn how you work. Same thing with psychic investigation. One thing I love doing is teaching other people how to do it and hoping that they're way better than I am. I have some students where I just, sit back and eat the popcorn and think, oh my gosh, you are amazing. How do you do that? That's my goal, is to train them to be better than I am. So I hope that it goes somewhere. I hope we're more accepted. So we'll see.
Another thing I've noticed, it's a consensus that the mediums, the intuitives always tell us that anybody can do this, but they have to train. And like the program that you're in with, I believe it's Tony Stockwell, there's a lot to do, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. I started, I think, with one of his 3-day classes and I was just hooked. So I signed up for his year-long mentorship and, I think I did 3 or 4 of those, with the last one being this past year, where we worked with him on cases, like cases that people brought to him. So a lot of training. And still, like I said, I have students that do things like they'll see the lips moving if the person's alive. And if they're not moving, that's their sign for their past. I don't see that. I think there's so many different things we can discover. That's why I like people to be open. What are you going to do? What are you going to do that's your psychic superpower?
Can you give us an example from your work that does not involve psychic investigations, where a sitter came in and you brought forth something evidential, I believe it's called?
If I'm doing a reading?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And if I bring something evidential? So when I do a reading, things that are evidential for me, I don't always see spirit. It's hard to explain. If I see them kind of like foggy, but if something sticks out for me, like they have a beard, right? That could be evidence. And I will sometimes feel like, this was the other day, I feel like I want to go like this with my beard, right? And the thing with that reading was that when his father passed, they had cut off the beard and saved it. So that was the evidence, right? That was important, not just that he had a beard.
And you were doing this, you felt like...
Yeah. And I go, I want to talk about the beard,
Interesting. But you don't always get visions, right?
I don't. It just depends. I feel things. Like I'll say, I feel like they were tall. I feel like they worked with their hands. Be more specific than that, but it's more like I feel things. And like I said, if I see something, it's like something that stands out. If they're wearing a hat or they had something wrong with their leg or something, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. Great. Anything else we should know about mediumship, the veil getting thinner, and so forth?
Oh gosh, there's so much. I would say if anyone's interested, right, give it a go. It takes a lot of practice. I consider myself a baby because even though I've been doing this for years, every year, every reading I do, I learn something new.
Really? Every single one? That's
every
incredible.
Single one. It is.
What are some of the biggest rewards for you for doing this work, whether it involves psychic investigations or not?
Helping people connect to their loved ones in a meaningful way. And sometimes you don't know the impact you have until later when they write you. And I think about one reading I did not too long ago where I felt that the grandmother had written this letter and the girl read the letter, it was going to sound differently than when she first got it, and it was going to have meaning for her life now. And she's like, well, I don't know, and then like a month later, she goes, I found it, and here it is, and it sounds just like my grandma. So those kind of moments.
So I guess one of the takeaways is that it also provides evidence that consciousness survives. Like when we lose our friends in our family, they're not gone forever. They're just on a different plane, a different frequency.
Yeah, exactly. I always say for the soul, it's like no difference. They're right here with us. It's just for us, feel them or see them in a different way.
Kelly, great stuff. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Johnny.
In the meantime, how can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so all my social media is Medium Kelly Kristen, and Kelly with a Y and Kristen is I-N.
Okay. And the website?
MediumKellyKristen.com.
Awesome. Okay, I'll put that link in the show notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. In the meantime, you can find more information on closertovenus.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.